Monggo.
Giving a round of applause to Gajah General Minister. Thank you. Many traditional songs performed by Gajah General Minister to start our program today. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Senate Hall, Universitas Gajah Mada, to the open lecture to strive for world-class university management in the context of rapid and dynamic regional transformation beyond 2015, and commemorating the 65th anniversary of Universitas Gajah Mada. And this day become an incredible moment for us to meet the chief speakers today. We have a very great honor of welcoming Deputy President for Academic Affairs and Provost, National University of Singapore, Professor Eng Chye. Welcome. And Pro-Vice-Chancellor and President of Monash University in Malaysia, Professor Helen Bartlett. Welcome, selamat datang. And in our program today, we will have open lectures completed by questions and answer session. And let's start off today by listening speech from Vice Rector for Research and Community Service of Universitas Gajah Mada, Professor Sulaiman.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, good morning. It is very great and pleasure and address you today. Plus, please allow me on behalf of the University of Gajah Mada to welcome our most active speakers, to Professor Eng Chye, the Deputy President for Academic Affairs and Provost National University Singapore, and Professor Helen Bartlett, Pro-Vice-Chancellor and President Monash University Malaysia. Selamat datang in our campus di Gajah Mada di campus. Welcome to Yogyakarta. It is a cultural city and education city, but also tourism city. So we have the pillars of Yogyakarta: education, culture, and tourism. So again, as a leading specialist in the issues of university program and management, and as a strong partner of Universitas Gajah Mada, we deeply appreciate your time in sharing your ideas and experience with us. this year, in that Gajah has 16th anniversary because he has not understood through. The Super Lecture is one important event to mark this important moment. The theme of the open lecture is to strive forward class real estate management in the context of active and dynamic regional transformation by 2015. As a short description, this open lecture is part of continuous support to provide university managers in UKM with opportunities to enhance awareness on the importance of developing quality assurance system and corporate mechanism towards world-class entrepreneurial research university. We are here, there are some participants from other university, from Yana Badra, Chungki, and some of participants from Sanada Dharma. Okay, thank you. And others from Utas Gunung Kidul. So again, thank you very much for your participation. I thank you all and look forward to seeing fruitful discussion and most importantly, result that represents an exchange of ideas and experience in this event. So, terima kasih and success in this seminar, in this lecture. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's rapidly proceed to the open lectures by Professor Eng Chye and Professor Helen Bartlett that will be led by our moderator, Mrs. Ika Dewana, PhD. I kindly invite speakers and the moderator to come over to the stage, to the speaker's chair. Professor Helen and Professor Bartlett, please come. Mrs. Ika Dewana, PhD. She is a Director for Cooperation, Alumni, and Global Initiative of Universitas Gajah Mada. Next, we'll give 2 hours and a half until 11:50 to share decision and to introduce the speakers briefly. Thank you.
Selamat pagi, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada Bapak dan Ibu dari UGM dan juga dari beberapa universitas yang telah hadir dalam kesempatan pagi hari ini. So thank you very much, Professor Eng Chye, for coming here and delivering the speech, and also to Professor Helen. Thank you very much for your time during your very busy time and hectic schedules. Yeah. So this is our background why we have this open lecture. That this is Indonesia today, and in 2030 we will have the needs of skilled workers around 130 million, and also we have the market opportunity in consumer services, agriculture and fisheries, resources and education, etc. This is the situation, but yeah, when we see our public university, we have around 100 public university and 3,018 private university with only 14.65% of students in higher education. So this is the number in population. This is the data in 2014. Development Index, and Indonesia is considered low because below the medium Human Development Index. Then we have not published so much paper, almost zero. And this is the patent applications that still limited. Where is Indonesia? Indonesia is here. So this is the number of patent applications in Indonesia. We don't have enough researchers. This is the number of our researchers compared to Singapore, Prof. Tan. This is the number. Sorry that this is not good, but this is the number of Singapore, United Kingdom, US, Germany, even Malaysia. We have the lower number of researchers. And this is the researcher qualifications. Most of our researchers are still in a master degree. Very limited PhD holders. And we have also the very limited expenditure related to the R&D in our country. Like we see compared to India and Malaysia, it's very, very low. And this is also that we spend very limited money for research. This is for the government 65%, but the number is only 0.1% of the overall. So this is the challenges for academicians and university managers. That's why we invite Professor Eng Chye and also Professor Helen for this lecture, because we need to learn on how National University Singapore and also Monash University can strive for the world-class and top-ranked university in Asia and in the world. Professor Helen is the Chief Executive and also President of Monash University, Malaysia, and she has been attached to Monash University for how long? For 6 years. Yes. And Professor Eng Chye is now the Vice President of National University of Singapore and also the Provost. And he is also a scientist. Your background is mathematics? Yes. His background is mathematics. So we would like to listen to both presentations from Professor Eng Chye and Professor Helen. And I will give the opportunity to Prof. Tan first. Yes, please, to present your paper. Thank you very much.
Can we adjust the slides because I think it's slanted? That one too. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for inviting me to the Universitas Gajah Mada. This is my second time in this university. So before I start, I just would like to represent NUS to convey our warmest congratulations to Universitas Gajah Mada on the occasion of her 65th anniversary. Congratulations. I would just give you a brief idea on the National University of Singapore, which I would just use NUS in abbreviation. Today, I think we are quite a big university. I have 16 faculties and schools. So sometimes you use schools, sometimes you use faculties, but they are the same. And amongst them, I have 2 medical schools. Right? And 6 overseas colleges, 24 research institutes, and also 3 research centers of excellence each of which is funded to the tune of about $150 million. In terms of the size of NUS, it's a little bit smaller than UGM. We have about 37,000 students, about 2,600 teaching staff, about 3,000 research staff, and about 5,000 admin staff. Right. So if you look at the total size of the university, it's about 50,000. Right. So it's I would say reasonable, quite a big university, and it's the biggest in Singapore. Where's the control? All right. Now, I'm just going to touch on two issues. One on university governance. In the NUS, the Provost is like the Chief Operating Officer. I'm also, I guess, in the United States or American context, the Chief Academic Officer. So all the deans report to me. In a sense, I'm the number 2 man in the university. In terms of university governance, I would say that we have 3 major shifts in NUS. Right? And this shift was sort of over the past 15 years. We were a British colony, if you know, and we adopted the UK system. The UK system is actually very major, sort of specific, concentrated, and they look at specialization. And we adopt the more broad-based one in the mid-90s. So, in terms of teaching, we move more towards the American system. In the 90s, we also moved from a research teaching university to a research university, and at the turn of the century, we introduced entrepreneurship, and I'll explain a little bit why. What is more important is that in 2006, we made a big change. We became an autonomous university, and I will explain a little bit about what autonomy means. Now, in 2006, the government actually gave the university the freedom, right, to really set our own directions. And it is a new type of relationship with the Ministry of Education. And what the government did was to appoint a board of trustees to oversee the university. And the ministry actually would not manage as many of the things in the university as it used to do, right? And what is important too is that the government is committed to continue to fund the universities. The reason is very simple. Singapore has no resources, only humans. So the human resource is a very important component, and we have to do our very best and to stretch our human resource. Right? So that's the basic philosophy, invest in education. And government still funds 70% of the university's budget, and this is a very sizable budget. And they have a certain formula that based on how many students to train. The other thing is that while the government funds us, right, in the past the government will want to check and try to approve everything. Like in the past, our professors will have to go to the government for approval. And of course the minister would ask, I know nothing about, professorship. Why do you need a Minister of Education to approve? And what is important is that we signed 2 agreements with the ministry. One is a policy agreement where the ministry says that we will provide you with this funding because we want this to happen. So they will tell you in the next 5 years how many students I need to be trained. For instance, this is how we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to measure. Now, one important thing, because of this corporatization, is what I'm going to say, and they do not want to meddle. So we were able actually to implement many changes. All right, corporate governance. Our board actually has a lot of business people, and we bring in ideas from business to help the university. And business ideas, how we deal with HR. All these are actually useful ideas that we can learn. Still that we want to be a leading global university, centered in Asia, and influencing the future. Right? These are just words. Let me just highlight. I won't have time to go through everything. And Prof. Ika has actually mentioned some of this in her preamble. Now we have massification, which means that more university students. Example, now China graduates 7 million people. Alright, and that's 10 years ago, it was only like 2 million every year. So the big is tremendous. And it's not just China, it's India, it's, right? Because the societies are wealthier. There's a lot of competition now. You have ranking tables, right? Higher education, QS, and what have you. That now people think that it's a good model and they are bringing it back, right? And in this case, Duke actually brought it back. It's very helpful because the industry, they actually have very good best practices which can be adapted to the university, right? So, just to summarize, that talent is the most important thing for a university, right? You must make sure that, of course, the HR, the compensation is good. You also must make sure that you have the environment to keep that going. I've given you a sense of the governance and the talent management, which I think are two important aspects. One is the structure, and the other one is actually how you deal with people. And because if you look at university, a university is about people. A university is about top students, very good students. A university is about good faculty members. A university is about good admin and support staff. Alright, you need all this in order to make a good university. So talent management is actually key. Right. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Tan, for the very inspiring speech on quality management in higher education. And we have to that is structure and people, and we have learned from National University of Singapore. Actually, I listened to Professor Tan's lecture for the first time in June in Cebu, Philippines, and it was so inspiring. Yeah, and this is what we need, and we need our friends here, our colleagues here in Gajah Mada University to also listen to what Professor Tan mentioned in the previous lecture. And now we have Professor Helen Bartlett. Professor Helen Bartlett has worked in higher education for over 30 years, holding a senior leadership roles at all organizational levels in universities in UK, Hong Kong, and Australia. And also the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Monash University, Australia. Professor Bartlett, time for you.
Good morning, everybody. I must just correct that little mistake there. I'm not the president of Monash Australia. I'm the president of Monash University in Malaysia, which operates in Kuala Lumpur. But I have been in Monash University for 6 years. I was with Monash in Australia for 4, and then I got the good luck and fortune to be asked to come and lead the Monash operation in Kuala Lumpur, where I've been now for nearly 2 years. Last night at dinner, we were talking about where everybody has studied, and I'm so impressed with how many colleagues last night have studied in Australia. And I know it's not the only place to study, but I'd be interested to to know how many in the audience have studied in Australia. Can you just show your hand? Maybe? Oh, okay, not so many. Maybe it's more the company at last night's dinner. Anyway, you'd be most welcome to visit Monash in Australia, or indeed Monash in Malaysia. We are next door neighbours. So I'm going to be focusing on really what Monash has done to build its global footprint through partnerships and collaboration. You know, we talk a lot about building partnerships, but it's not that straightforward. And I think that if I can just give you a little insight into the experiences of Monash over the years in terms of trying to organise its activities around building partnerships. So I just want to start with a few words about world-class universities, what they are, what they aren't, the Monash context and strategies, some partnership models, thinking around partnership models, and then what are some of the critical success factors. You will know this, I'm sure, that there are a number of very obvious features of world-class universities. There's a lot of literature about this. They're expected to be excellent in research, excellent in teaching, have, of course, plenty of funding from government and non-government sources, have highly talented students, as we've just heard, have well-equipped infrastructure, and of course to have well-defined governance structures that are autonomous and separate from another controlling body such as government. So those are the features that we're all very familiar with. Of course, in considering, any university in the world, whether it's appropriate to get on this journey to becoming a world-class university, we have to remember that the policies and strategies in any one university or country don't necessarily transpose. As UGM and other universities here, there is the opportunity, of course, to define your own world class. And it isn't always easy or appropriate to simply follow others. The second point is that, of course, the university rankings, which we're all pursuing, we have to acknowledge that they are here to stay. They do mean a lot to our customers, to students and to their families who do look at the rankings. So we have to think how we're going to tackle the pursuit of rankings. Of course, in terms of governance, we've just heard a lot about that. Governance structures in a world-class university also need to be probably a bit different and go beyond what has been traditionally known as the governance structure in a university. And I think that the final point here is what I'm going to be focusing on, and that's around strategic partnerships, which are key. So just a little bit of background about Monash University, for those of you that might not know so much. It's a little bit younger than this university. It was established in 1958 as a multidisciplinary comprehensive university. It's now in the world's top 1%, and with many of its disciplines ranked in the world's top 50. It's a member of what Australia calls the Group of 8, so the elite research-intensive universities. It has a turnover of about 1.8 billion Aussie dollars, and it has actually now around 65,000 students. Interestingly, from all over the world, and a number of those students go abroad for study experiences, not as many as I think should. Australian students, how they like the environment in Australia. It's often quite difficult to get Australian students to get out of the country and go see the world. So we're really working on increasing that number. Over 7,000 staff, 10 faculties, 10 very broad faculties, and highly autonomous faculties. So a lot of devolution has been given over the years to the faculties, who some might say run almost as little mini colleges, and that can be an issue at times. Monash has a presence in many different countries, but it has a physical presence in Malaysia, South Africa, Italy, China, and in the UK and India. And I'm going to say a little bit more about each of those. And it is home now to many of the leading nations' research capability initiatives. It's a very international student community, as I mentioned. Interestingly, the international student numbers within Australia are not so enormous as people might think. It's when you add to it all of the offshore developments that you see that Monash as a whole has about 1/3 of its students that are international. It has a big alumni network, and of course many alumni here in Indonesia and your next door neighbour, Malaysia. As I mentioned, it is a highly globalised university with a very wide footprint, and it has a pathway provider, Monash College, who also operates all over the world. And that's been very important for Monash in bringing along students to prepare them for their higher education experience at Monash. So the Monash College development has been quite critical as an initiative to build pathways into the university. So Australia has, this is a bit small, I'm going to say more about this shortly. It has now 5 campuses in Victoria, around Melbourne. It says 6 there. We actually did free up one of our campuses, which became a university in its own right.
Thank you very much, Professor Helen, for very wonderful, clear and detailed presentations on how Monash University managed to be a world-class research university through collaboration and partnership. And it is just for the information that Monash University is actually 11 years younger than Gajah Mada University. So thank you very much. Yeah. And now we would like to open the discussion and Q&A sessions for the two presenters. Please, we have Professor Sridaharjo.
My name is Sri, and I have a question for each of our distinguished speakers. First, to Professor Tan. It's a very broad topic that you presented, and I very appreciate that. Of course, I must make a priority in which area that I must make my question. Only one area that I related with your presentation is on the human resources HR. You mentioned that one of the key points there is a very attractive and flexible HR. Just want to go deeper on that. I would like to compare it with our local situation here, where most of our academic staff are government officers. I mean, okay, I agree. Yeah. And for that reason, the time commitment to be spent in the university must be well managed. But the problem is sometimes some of our academic staff, they may be lured or attracted by other offerings from different external offices to provide consulting, to provide what any other expertise that may require time spent. So my question is, how do you manage the potential conflict of commitment in terms of time spending for the faculty members? It may not be happening in ADS, but I don't know. And for the Professor Helen, you mentioned about how difficult it is to consolidate the major research teams. For example, in Monash University in Malaysia. And my question is, could you share a little bit with us about how do you convince regarding the consolidated major teams for research when you have many faculty members from science and technological faculties and also from the art and humanities, especially when we come to agree on KPIs matrices. I personally feel the pressure here because I share the responsibility for managing research at this 18 faculties here. It's not easy job. Thank you.
I would say that there are various aspects that you have to look at. One is the structure. The other one is the recognition or compensation, right? And the third one would be, what are your expectations? Right? All these are linked together. So yes, our faculty members, they can do other things other than teaching and research. So one example of other things would be consultancies. So our faculty members can do consultancies for companies. Companies can hire them for their expertise. All right, they do their consultancies. Companies pay them. Right? So we allow them to do it as long as they don't compromise on their teaching and research. Right? And we have a limitation. You can do consultancy for 1 day a week, maximum, or 52 days in a year, equivalent. If you exceed, we don't allow it. Right? So 52 days is the maximum that you can. But you could have a situation where a person earns more money from so we don't have any restriction on how much they earn from consultancies. And some of them do earn a lot. So like lawyers, the lawyers, they do a lot of consultancies, they can be paid very well. But one thing is that if they do not fulfill our expectations, be it in teaching or research, right? Then I can actually tell them that since you are not doing your teaching and research well, I'm not going to allow you to do your consultancy, even though you have not used up any of the full 52 hours. Right? So we have the way to control, and we measure them every year. So one part of our compensation system is that we have a bonus, which is paid every year. And the bonus really recognizes the faculty members' contributions to teaching, to research, and to service. So we make it very clear that if you want a bonus, then you have to do well in one of the 3 areas, be it teaching, or research, or service. But of course, if you do well in all 3 areas, then you get 3 times more. Right? So it has to be, so the structure has to be something simple so that people can understand. I guess, yeah, we are talking about professors, but professors may be very smart in some areas, but they can be quite naive in other areas, right? And you need something which is quite easy, right, for them to appreciate. And you have to measure. right? You have to measure it, and then we can be quite tough, because if a professor who is tenured, so in NUS we have tenure is up to 65 years old, right? So usually you start as an assistant professor, you are given 7 years. 7 years, if you don't get tenure, you're out. But if you get tenure, doesn't mean that, oh, I can relax. If you don't perform well, then I can tell them that, I can tell my faculty member that I'm going to institute a process to revoke your tenure. Right? And if you don't do well, say for a few years, then I can sort of institute that process to say that you're not performing up to the standards expected, so you don't deserve your tenure. We're going to take away your tenure. So we still have that mechanism to do that. Right? So it's the structure, the rewards, and then how you measure them. You know, that will sort of help you in crafting the policy.
So your question about consolidating research. In my experiences in the last 2 years, I mentioned that we went from having a multitude of research activity or strengths with no real focus, and we wanted to be able to channel our funding better. It was being kind of frittered internally without much effect. So the exercise we went through, as I mentioned, was to build themes that had resonance with our expertise within the campus, but also reflected the priorities of the region. So the themes we came up with really act as, I suppose, storylines for us to communicate to the world what we do. And they are multidisciplinary themes. So the research teams are allocated money on the basis of a number of KPIs. So they have to be addressing multidisciplinary research. They have to be doing industry relevant, or tapping into regional priorities in some way. They have to involve partners. So we encourage people to build partnerships outside of the university. They have to have a long-term strategy, so not just one-off projects that will die, but thinking, okay, where's this going to take me? So there are a number of KPIs that we set to we call research platforms for receiving and utilising the money. It's still a work in progress. As a leader in a university, I can see it's working for us in terms of this storytelling. But I just had a conversation last week with my heads who feel that it's about control. They would like more control over the money. And this is where you get into the dilemma of ensuring that we've got strategic direction and traction in the areas we want, but also, allowing schools to have, responsibility as well. So it's an ongoing tension, but I think now people are starting to see that it's working. Our research grant income has gone up fourfold in 2 years. Our industry is just banging on our door. We've had such a lot of media coverage, and now we're having to get more organised in terms of our industry engagement, making quite hard decisions about who we want to engage with, and not just to say yes to everybody. So it's starting to have quite a lot of very positive impact within a relatively short space of time.
Can I add something? I thought useful to share a few points about research. NUS has grown to our current level, not in a short time. Actually, NUS did a few things some 20 years back, and we grow, right, stronger and stronger. So don't expect to sort of jump, say, in a short span of time. You need time actually to grow people, right? That's the reason why I advised just now that it's important that you focus a lot of attention on growing. And the second point is that a university at a different level of development would need different strategies. Right? You cannot say what's the best practice of a world-class university and then just copy. That will not work and may not work for you. So you have to adapt so that it works. So let me give you an example. For those who track China, right, you will notice that China has grown very quickly over the last 10 years. Right? And at the initial part, when China forces its university to focus on research.
My name is Eng Chye. Today we have about 4,200 university members. It's a very big higher education system. We have 20,000 program of study all over the nation. So what do you think we have to do? Not one of our universities is noted as world-class university. Our government has no policy about developing or making. There's no decision, decisive decision about what we should do about world-class university. So what is a chance for our government in terms of developing world-class university, which is now, I say it's very important for our future, because competition is among universities, not among program of study. We don't have any world-class universities. Thank you very much.
Is your question on what should Indonesia do, all right, to manage the problem and also to sort of bring up the level of higher education? Am I right? Okay. I'm not in a position to tell your government what to do, but I thought that it's not only in Indonesia.
Observations from Malaysia and what has been happening there in recent years. And forgive me, I'm not so familiar with the sort of regulatory or policy environment in higher education in Indonesia. But in Malaysia, similar problems there have been in terms of a multitude of types of higher education institutions of varying quality. So what I see is happening is, the introduction a few years ago of a quality framework. So all universities now are ranked on their teaching and learning and awarded scores. For universities as a whole and also for disciplines. And I think and you can buy into this or not, it's not compulsory, but it's really pushing universities to think about teaching and learning quality. And you can see it starting to move up a number of universities to differentiate them. Similarly, on the research side of things, they introduced a research scoring scheme similar to what the UK did, Australia did when I was working in those countries.
Professor Khan, since in US, the structure of the human resources is like divided between the lecturer and the researcher. You mentioned in your presentation, and in case of Indonesia, that as a lecturer we have three duties. First, to be a lecturer, and second, to be a researcher, and also for the community services in the same time. So that's why, like in the day, we have to change. In the morning, we have to teach, and then during a day, we do the research, and in the evening, we start for the community services. So I would like to know what's kind of the differences between the lecturer and the researcher in your university, and how can the research and the teaching is connecting each other, since that they do it with by the different person. That's the first question. And the second, since I'm from the Quality Assurance Office, and I would like to know you mentioned about the evaluations about the teaching, that you measure the learning. That is, you mentioned that it's very difficult. And I think that's also in the UGM, your experience very difficult to measure the learning. Because first we have to evaluate the senior, like for the senior professor, for example, like that. And also the content of the learning also is different from faculty to the faculties. And I would like to know for the more detailed information that about the standard that you use for to measure the learning, and also the content and the process of the evaluation for the learning in use. Thank you very much.
The first question is more direct. I may have you may have misunderstood my statistics. When I say research staff, these are actually mostly the postdocs and the research assistants. So they are basically the supporting research staff. When I say teaching faculty, I have two types. One is the regular track or the tenure track, and there's the other one, the educator track. Right. The educator track is small. It's about 1,000 people. They are mostly doing teaching, right? And they usually will teach the more foundational type of courses, like the first year university courses. They do a bit of research, but they do pedagogical research, right? The 1,006 of them are on the tenure track. The tenure track, in the past we used to have lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, and professor. But we changed to the American system of having assistant professor to be promoted to associate professor, and then it goes up to full professor. So only 3 ranks. For those on the tenure track, you have to do teaching and research. Right? You cannot just do one. You cannot just do research and not do teaching. You cannot just do teaching and not do research, because you will have to be on the educator track if you do that. So on the tenure track, we measure the performance for this both. So I hope it clarifies. So it's like you, it's your lecturers who need to do teaching as well as research. Now your second question is a very good question. You know, how do you measure teaching? First of all, I think you need really to measure learning over a period of time, right? And most of us don't do that, but we need to do that. We need to do how well the students, all right, perform 5 years, 10 years, 15 years after graduation.
Thanks very much for the presentation. It's very good. My name is Eddie. I'm a first student for research from the Malaysia Faculty of Economics and Business UK. And the spelling is, the pronunciation is UGM, not UGM, Universitas Gajah Mada. That's the name of the university. We call it UGM. It's a bit different like in English pronunciation, but that's okay. I was at the time accepted at the National University of Singapore for my master's degree, and also as well as to Monash University, but I choose Monash because Singapore is the same as Indonesia, it's just ASEAN, and Monash is the west and the east. That's more challenging for me at that time. But that's a joke. My question is for you is about 3. The first is about fundraising. The second is about the we have like Monash and also like NUS, we have accreditation internationally. We have AACSB accreditation, but Monash is very beautiful. You bought 3 triple crown EMBA and also EQUIS. We want to learn about your experience in reaching Triple Crown from Monash University and also from National University of Singapore about the maintaining the ASCSP accreditation. It is very challenging to get the international accreditation, but more challenging is to survive on the new standards for ASCSP accreditation. And I would like to know about the fundraising, how National University of Singapore and also Monash University to raise the fund, especially from the alumni and also from maybe non-alumni, which is a good university. I think it has a very big endowment fund, and we want to learn from you how to raise the fund especially from alumni, from your alumni. Second is how to maintain the accreditation from both NUS and especially from Monash, that you have a Triple Crown, which is very excellent. And the last one is maybe I would like to know about the new tagline for ASCSP, the innovation, engagement, and impact. You already mentioned about the impact, but not the engagement and also the innovation. The detail on the maybe an example for innovation, the new innovation on the teaching and also the research. Okay, thank you very much for the answering the question.
Now, which one should I take first? Look, the question about the Triple Crown, Monash's Faculty of Business and Economics. I'm not from that field, but I've obviously had a fair bit to do with it because the award also applies to the Malaysian campus. And I think that the factors really that have contributed to winning the Triple Crown and in terms of their recruitment of people who could provide the necessary leadership. So the talent management became very, very focused. Their requirements for output very high, and their industry engagement, or should I say business engagement, very, very strategic. So those would be three things that over many years the faculty have been building up their credentials. Of course, the teaching and learning quality has been critical to all of that. And one of the challenges for the business faculty has been the very high proportion of international students in the faculty. I can't remember what proportion it is, but it must be 50% or more, with the predominant group being Chinese students. And that's created many challenges for driving the teaching and learning strategies to be successful with a cohort of international students who have perhaps different expectations and different learning styles. So it's been multifaceted. Having got there, and the preparations, by the way, leading up to the final outcome were 2 years in terms of preparing the materials and getting everything in order and having a team who were dedicated to it. So it wasn't a last minute thing. The team were assembled very early on, and those people became expert in assembling everything that was required for presenting the very best face of the faculty when the assessment time came around. And having, because Monash is so global, where business is offered in different places, actually making sure that the team on different sites were really cooperating with each other. So our Malaysian team worked very closely with the team at Clayton. They got their stories right, they were singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were, and that level of cooperation took a lot of, a lot of planning and delivery. So those are just some of the things that I've been aware of in the awarding, and of course all of those things are going to be important in retaining the Triple Crown, because these things are not for life. you have to be reassessed. Your other questions, I might just, I can't remember what the second one was, but your last question on fundraising. Now, you know, Australian universities typically have not been very good at fundraising. They're not like America at all. They don't have the history of philanthropy in the culture. I mean, Australia is a very new country, doesn't have the history of philanthropy. So it's been a challenge, I would say. Now, some Australian universities have done a lot better at alumni raising than others. And really, Monash has only sort of started to become much more strategic and serious about this in the last, I would say, 5 years or so. And the strategies around alumni raising have been, you know, they're long-term strategies. They're about, first and foremost, building relationships. And not sort of, you know, sending a letter out to alumni, you know, 3 years after they've graduated, asking them for that doesn't work. So, you know, one aspect of the strategy is to build your alumni, to build your alumni while they're students, to get them into the spirit of the organisation, identifying with it, building that sense of belonging. So that's, more recent years, that's become a major part of our strategy, is working to build that identity with students. So we have them for life, and hopefully then there will be an inclination to give to the organisation. So it's a long-term strategy. The other part of it is really identifying prominent alumni. So the individuals who have reached great heights and who are very influential. And, you know, those people are so grateful when we contact them. Even if they're very, very important in, you know, CEOs of large multinational companies or chief ministers or whatever, they love to be approached by the university to do something. I mean, you don't go and ask for money. Of course, what you're doing is engaging with them, asking them to come and, you know, do an opening or be on an advisory panel or, you know, help with some scholarship scheme. So working out how to engage a prominent alumni and getting that relationship developing, you know, in a very strong way. That's, you know, that's another key element. There are many other parts of it, but that's probably a couple of things. I'm currently working on a major donation for our Malaysian campus. There has never been a donation before. It's harder if it's a private university. People are more inclined to give to public universities. Private universities, somehow there's a feeling, oh, you've got enough money. But of course, universities never have enough money. And I'm working on a major donation that came through quite a circuitous route, but I recognised that it could be a successful one. And I just put my personal effort into it. I didn't give it to somebody else to do. I worked on the relationship personally. You know, it required me going back to Australia for a couple of visits. It required me taking time out of weekends, going to different functions, and I've now been in Malaysia for nearly 2 years, and I reckon we will have this major donation secured probably early next year. That's quite quick, actually. 2 years is quite quick, and there were a number of features of that were, you know, quite unique. But I reacted quite quickly. I could see, I started to develop a plan for how I could engage with this particular donor, and just, you know, was very persistent in working it through and not being too impatient. You know, some of my heads will say, why are you spending all this time? Just ask for the money.
I'll just add that one of the key things if you want your alumni to donate is that they must have a good experience in the university. If they don't have a good experience in the university, it's very hard to get them to donate to you. But practice is also that if you look at US universities, the alumni will probably donate 10-20% of the total donations. There's still a big 80% that are really coming from high worth individuals who may not be related to your university, right, but are willing to donate to education because they're passionate about certain things. You know? They can be passionate about certain part of research, medical research. So if you have a medical school, a very good source of donation because your doctors cure a patient, the patient will be very happy to donate a professorship in cancer, in whatever. Those are actually very effective ways. So cultivating high worth individuals who are known to contribute towards education is a part of this donation drive. So you'll find that you really have to sell something to them. Alright? You have to know what they want. Are they interested in helping the poor students? Or are they hoping to support research to find a cure for certain disease? Or are they interested in general community service? And so on and so forth. So you need to know what they like to. And then you have to present your ideas to them. So you have to have a few very good ideas, compelling, that can make people say, okay, I think I can help and contribute. So there are many examples. For instance, recently we create an event, or rather a donation drive, for couples who met in NUS. So couples who meet in NUS, we ask them to donate a bursary, right? And then we have some event for them where we bring all these couples together, all right? They can sort of relieve a little bit of their courtship during the university, all right? And we get them together. We also get them to bring their friends who have been couples when they were in university, hoping that we can tag on more and get them to donate. So this is one way. But there are many, many ways in which you have to think of getting people to donate. You really have to have very good ideas. So our buildings are available for naming. So naming is good. Programs, some of the top programs, they are available for naming. Right? So we named our medical school for $100 million. Right? And that was quite good. And some schools, of course, the smaller schools, $30 million, and so on and so forth. We also allow naming of buildings, naming of classrooms. In US, even chairs, like chairs in the Senate room can be named. Right? So there are actually many ways that you can be creative. I'll suggest that you just go to any website of US university, and the top are really Harvard, Princeton, the Ivy Leagues. They raise a lot of money every year. Right? In fact, recently, the University of Southern California, I think they raised $1 billion US within the last 5 years. $1 billion. Right? And you may actually want to look at their website and understand what are the things they do. You can learn a lot from them. So that's a question on fundraising. On accreditation, I do not have many problems with accreditation. We do go through accreditation, but we do not have many problems. My sense is that if you think right and do it right, you don't have to worry about accreditation. Right? And you need to put a lot of thoughts into your program. Right? And you make sure that you do it right and measure it right, then accreditation is the piece. So that's my sort of 2 cents on that part. You mentioned about innovation. I don't quite catch your question about. Are you asking for examples?
Yeah, you examples and you as a part of ASCSB accreditation, that's 3 parts. First is innovation, second is engagement, and the third is impact.
Oh,
there are 3 main points for ASCSB accreditation with the new standard now.
I see. So, well, I guess in terms of innovation, they probably be thinking of innovation in terms of education, right? So, for instance, our business school, one of the things that we introduced, which was quite useful, was this Enterprise 50 program. We want our students to understand small and medium-sized companies, how they grow, and we look at sort of companies that were formed in the last 10 years and which have been doing very well. Then we send a small group of students, and their purpose is to understand the business ideas of that company and why the company worked. Right. So it becomes a sort of a research program for this group of students. We look at their report, and we even have the students summarize some of these reports and publish it in the local newspapers. So that's one example of an innovation where our students, sort of trying to understand and connect between theory and practice. Right? And that, I guess, is an innovation. The engagement part is the part which I think I touched on. And I think particularly relevant for business students is the industry engagement, right? And I talk about internship, right? Internship have to be meaningfully integrated to the curriculum. You shouldn't just send a student to the internship and say that, oh, you basically have half a year off, you go and do some job. I don't even care what job you do. Then that's not good. In fact, you should prepare the students for the internship. You should have very good discussion with the company on how you can allow the student to learn while the student is working in the company. The student should not be like pouring coffees, writing minutes, organizing meetings. These are actually low-level jobs that you would not want your students to be doing. You want your students to value add the company, all right, and also to learn in the process. So the internship and the engagement and the meaningful way that this is integrated into your curriculum is extremely important. So what's the third component?
That's what we.
So we have innovation, engagement, and
impact.
Impact, we have talked about it. Impact can be measured in various ways. But like I said, it's important to know where the student go after that, whether the student get very good company sort of feedback, and then 5, 10 years, 20 years down the road, whether the student has succeeded, right, in his career or career.
Thank you very much, Professor Tan and Professor Bartlett, for the presentations and also for the discussion. I think because of the time, we have to stop this session, and we will continue during the lunch session. And we also will invite some of the participants here to join us in the third floor. Really, thank you very much, and for to close this session, that as we know, as we learned from Monash University, from Professor Bartlett, and also from the NUS, National University of Singapore, from Professor Tan, that maybe we have a different culture, different government, a different structure, etc. So what we have to do to strive for the world-class university is that we have to know where we are, and we have to continue our works and to encourage people to be with us, to strive for the excellency of Universitas Gadjah Mada. Yeah, thank you very much for the wonderful presentations and talks.
Well, thank you, Ms. Ikadewiana, to lead this session, and thank you so much, Professor Tan and Mr. Helen Bartlett, becoming speakers to this open lecture. And there will be token appreciations represented by UGM representative, please Dr. Ikadewiana to give the souvenir or memento. Once again, thank you for Professor Tan and for all